My grandmother, Louise Fisher, was on the original distribution committee for the Hartford Foundation. So she was always sort of a person that I admired and wanted to be like her. She was involved in a lot of Hartford activity with prison commissions and getting Kingswood started and Town County Club and so forth. So I always thought she was pretty cool. And I wish I could talk to her now. She was actually a very good influence on me.
I guess I just was brought up in a family that was involved with giving. I think giving takes the form of volunteerism, which every town wouldn't survive without it. And then others are able to give more material things. And I think I always saw that in my parents and their friends. And I've always been amazed at the amount of giving that occurs in every town. And so it's just something we've always done. If you're in a position to give time or give money or both, it just, nothing makes you feel better. So you do it. You know, I think that Dad had donated some property for, given the town property for a firehouse. I think he started the Little League in town primarily. Just was always involved in town activities. Not nearly as much as somebody was volunteering time. I'm very sensitive to how much time people put. But I think as far as a corporate person and supporting the town with assets we have and so forth, that was just something that was always done. He was one of the originators of the Cigar Harvest Festival in Hartford back in the 50s, which at that time I think would have maybe 250,000 people on the streets.
I remember, I grew up in Hartford, near Elizabeth Park, and that's one of the reasons I'm very interested in the Hartford Foundation, because I enjoyed living in Hartford. I just loved going to Noah Webster School and riding my bike around the Connecticut Historical Society, going to the Mark Twain House for our library. It was a very, very nice place to grow up. So I remember we had sort of backyard neighbors. So Whitney Street and Oxford Street had sort of backyard yards, and we all played with each other from the two different blocks. And we had a little fair, and we collected money. We played games and that sort of thing, and we collected money and gave it to the Camp Current or Times Farm, whatever the camp was during those days in the 50s. And that was maybe my first experience of trying to give back. Worked with Girl Scouts and just different things in school. My mom would always get involved in the PTA and organizations like that. And then at Chaffee, I went to Chaffee School, and our headmistress always talked about we had so many opportunities, and it was up to us to give back all the nice things that have happened to us.
Like Sue, it started off perhaps at a young age, because we also had our local fair. It was just in someone's backyard. It was up in East Windsor, Connecticut, and I often remind Sue as we're driving down that same road that we walked a pony up from Main Street in South Windsor up to East Windsor, which was probably about 7 miles. And I'm thinking, here we were 12 and walking a pony all the way up that street, and I can remember having the little games and so forth. But it was a Camp Current, one of those kinds of things that we were funding. And then I think the more serious time as far as volunteering, getting involved in that aspect was more in land conservation with the Connecticut River Watershed Council, and then we started our own land trust in '76. And that was really the start. Most of my free time or my giving time has always been with more on the land conservation side of things.
I was on the original committee for starting the Catalyst Fund, and I remember talking about what we were going to call it, and the Catalyst Endowment Fund came to all of us. It was a really good experience. So Tim and I were members of the Catalyst Fund for about 10 years and went to all the programs, and then we took a little break and got involved in some other things, and then this year being the 20th anniversary, we said we're going to revisit that, and it's been fun to be a part of it again. So that's my first experience, and then I've gotten involved with the interviewing for the scholarship program, which I really, really enjoy very much. It's wonderful to meet these kids and to go to the program that's held in June to honor them and make sure that they know how special they are. There are many applicants to the scholarship program, and the Hartford Foundation will screen those applicants and come up with, I believe, about 75 young people from the high schools in the greater Hartford area. And then a group of us go out and interview at the different high schools, and I believe about 60 young people are chosen to receive the scholarships, which are, at this point, $3,000 per year, renewable, if they keep up their grades and so forth. And so I just enjoy being a part of that process and meeting young people who are giving back themselves and who are just so conscientious about their futures and about helping their families, because they know that it's personally it's a big problem for a lot of the families to be paying for college education. So all of that is what I've enjoyed very, very much. And then to find some of the people that you've interviewed have received scholarships is a very exciting part of it. I feel like I was part of that process too. So I've lived in South Windsor. I've been a country girl now for 40-something years. And so, as I say, I've always felt it's very important for Hartford to be healthy, for us to be able to continue to enjoy parts of Hartford that we love, and so I feel our contribution to keeping the city healthy and keeping things going well in the city. I always enjoy working with children, something that's going to benefit early childhood education. I do remember a program where we benefited a group of young men, teen men who were I think it was a Saturday morning program, and we were able to keep that program open so that they could continue to have mentoring and learn more about life in general, and I thought that was a very good thing. But I used to be a school teacher. I taught elementary school, so that's why I always go back to early childhood education. As soon as kids learn to read, I think we're on the right track.
It was a great experience. I think, as Sue said, it exposed us to Hartford. We've been around Hartford all our lives. I enjoyed some of the, what do we have? We had what was it, a treasure hunter or something?
Oh, the tours, those were great.
And we went to places that I just hadn't been. And yet we used to spend a lot of time driving through Hartford. I'd take Sue through the north end of Hartford years ago, back in the 70s. We'd be driving through the north end of Hartford, looking at the architecture of some of these beautiful homes that were just sitting there. So that got us out into the city more. But I really, the impressive part was that it gave us an inkling of what's involved with making these decisions. And believe me, I wouldn't have the personality, the talent to make these decisions. I'm in awe of people that can sit down and look at all of the options they have to and come up with a decision about who's going to get the money, how much they're going to get. I was impressed with the whole structure, and I think that's probably led to our decision to emphasize to other nonprofits that the sense of security, just all of those positive reasons to have a trust fund set up with a third party, such as the Hartford Foundation, that gives you the best chance of having whatever your desires are carried out.
I have been involved with the Wood Memorial Library for over 40 years on the board. That's many years too long, but I've enjoyed it. It was a public library endowed by a family here in town, and the public library was moved to the center of town, and the library was going to be closed. So one of our local people said, we can keep this library open if we do this as a volunteer group. The library is endowed by a family for the heat and the lights and the brick and the mortar, which is wonderful. We don't have to come up with those dollars. But we need the money for programs, and so we do a lot of events and so forth. And it seemed to me that Tim and I did a cigar dinner for about 7 years. We've done a golf tournament for many years. years, it seems as if we were giving the money to the library and then the library was spending it for the year's budget. And I said, I want to see something start to develop here where we have some security, and I want to see some of this money set aside. So we worked quite a long time. Tim initiated the thought. We made the contribution for the endowment at the Hartford Foundation, and our board on the library actually all contributed for the starting thing, and then Tim and I made up the difference, and we were able to start the endowment at the Hartford Foundation for Wood Library. So now, although the return is quite small, we want to grow it. We're having a meeting in about a week to send out some information about the endowment that's been developed at Wood. We want to get some more people on board, and we're developing it kind of slowly, but working hard to get us to the next step. So it's a nice security for Wood.
You know, when you said it's sort of small, but it's growing, it's so new and it's so small that as you were going over the budget for the library, they didn't even include it in the.
But they're going to remember.
But you know what? It's even as small as it is, it equates to what somebody would be very excited about if it were a donation that somebody made. So it's making its impact right now. You know, I'd like to say that with the Wood Library fund that was set up, the endowment, my point was that it should be done. That it's not that big a deal. It's a big deal to have the perfect fund, structure the perfect way, all the verbiage exact, and so forth. But I hate to say this in a way, but you know, there's people dying every day, and there's people who want to see some sort of sense of permanence. And I'm hoping that people, when they know that the foundation is the one that's holding the money, and it's not the board, and it's not subjected to politics or anything else, that they know they can make a contribution to the endowment and know that it's going to be permanent.
And again, I think it will encourage other people in our community to think about the Hartford Foundation. For all the years I have been involved with the Hartford Foundation, actually, I think one of my original things that I did is I gathered a lot of the leaders in town together, and the Hartford Foundation people came out and made a presentation at the public library telling what the Hartford Foundation does, what the Hartford Foundation could do for the leaders in our town. And so it was kind of an initial just informational tract that we could get going. So again, with the endowment at Wood, hopefully other organizations will say, maybe we'll do that for our group.
Sue and I tend to think about perhaps two general areas that we want to have some sort of impact when we're through with our assets, so to speak. Sue's very much involved with education and children, and I'm very much involved in land conservation. You know, I came up with a sticker, and somebody said, well, geez, you ought to make a sticker out of that, because I had an expression that open space is cheaper than a shrink. And so it's very humbling. I think when it was mentioned about working in forestry and how do we save the forest, I think people have to know how humbling it is to be out in open space and let the rest of the world live a little too. I sit out in front of the house and I can just listen to the activity. And so many times we don't stop and listen to that activity. So Sue would be doing that through education, and I'd be doing it through conservation. I think those are probably the two areas that would be concentrating on.
I think because we live in a nice, warm community here, we are more excited about giving back because there's a structure, there's a feeling, there's an involvement that really makes it rewarding to do that. So those are good things. Volunteers in the community, keep it going.
South Windsor has a program where they honor the volunteers, and they get a normal turnout for dinner, and they give a little pen or something like that and so forth. I've often thought that if ever there was something that I would have our company sponsor, it would be if every commission in town had a campaign badge like they had in the military for different missions and so forth. and we had the Conservation Commission had a badge, and the Planning and Zoning had a badge, and every term that somebody was involved, they received another badge. Then, if they went out in the middle of the town's main park for a volunteer recognition day, and kids could see people with badges down to their feet, because that's what it takes in a town, and that's the kind of people we do have in town, that have been 40 years of volunteering. So it's alive and well. Sometimes we don't think we see it.